when we stand back and look at the big picture, we realize that the crisis is not just environmental. It is a much larger crisis. In fact, by calling it only an environmental crisis or just a climate change crisis, we are missing the fact that there is a bigger problem, which is pollution that we are throwing out, and we are missing that. But if we look still further, we find we are in a tautology. All of this climate change and pollution is the outcome of our industrial policies, which are the outcome of our economic policies, which are the outcome of our political policies, which are the outcome of our educational policies, which are the outcome of, and you go by in a circle. Everything is interdependent. The whole thing is in a gridlock. A gridlock of policies of human values and standards and priorities. And it is this that we need to address. And the rest are all symptoms. That's why we can say fundamentally it is a spiritual crisis. All the rest are symptoms. But when we look at the spiritual crisis, what are the elements of crisis? What is the problem of our consciousness? And what's the kind of shift that's needed? And I look at 6 points, key points. The first is that in all our policies, we are beginning with self-interest, which is fine as a starting point, but our sense of self needs to grow. Is my self-interest just me versus everyone else? Is it my family versus everyone else? Is it my country versus everyone else? Is it my humanity with everyone else? And this shift alone can make all the difference. The sense of self widening to include everyone else as my own other self. The second error and correction needed is that we are building our economic systems, lifestyles and values on increasing greed and unbridled desire. We are taught as children by design that we must grow in intensity of desire. We must never be satisfied. We must always want more and more and more. The economic structure of today is designed on consumption, not on proper utilization. And because the USA today throws away 99% of what it buys within 6 months of buying it, it keeps the system going in the rest of the world. Japan goes into a crisis of economics because the US is not as wasteful as it was. And that's not a sustainable structure. And we were taught until a few decades ago, in India especially, most Eastern traditions, and perhaps even in the West, if you go back 100 or 200 years, we were taught by our grandparents, learn to be satisfied with what you have. And based on this kind of a deeper satisfaction, and we are growing in skills and capacities, we built sustainable civilizations. In India, and it's not something commonly known because you still see India as a poor country today, India was the wealthiest country for the last 5,000 years. And until the colonial rule took over and subverted that economic system, it remained the wealthiest country in a sustainable manner. It was producing 25% of the world's industrial output when the British stepped in. And then after that, as it was colonized, the industrial output dropped back to zero. When the British left, it was zero. And then we have had to rebuild it. But now when we rebuilt it, we built it on a model which was imported, which was based on greed. And all of the original, traditional values have slowly been eroded and subverted. And this is a problem we're seeing all over the world, not just in India. We need to recover our deeper values, sustainable truths. So this is the second correction. The third is that increasingly we are living in the short-term interests, short-term vision. We are concerned with what happens in the next quarter's announcement of profits. I was looking at a report just a few days ago which said one of the biggest companies in information and communication technologies, it said they only had 2% growth last year and that does not excite investors. So now they have to do something more dramatic. You know what? Suppose this company became the world's only company, they would have 0% growth because they already filled the whole world. There is nothing wrong with steady growth or no growth at all as long as you're innovating and growing in quality. And we need to start thinking, looking at the world globally, in terms of sustainable living even with zero growth. And these are models which have worked in the past. That's how we had sustainable civilizations. And so the whole basis of economics needs to be thought of in a long-term perspective. Not my last quarter, but my last 7 years and my next 100 years. Some of the most profitable or most healthy Japanese companies, 50% of them are found to be 200 years old. 10% of them are 600 years old. That's the kind of thinking they've been brought up with. They're all closely family-held companies. They know that this was built up by my great-great-great-grandfather, and I have to ensure that it goes on to my great-great-great-grandson or granddaughter. And that kind of thinking changes everything. You're thinking in a timeline of a longer duration than just tomorrow and the moment's need and desire. And you learn to withhold today's short-term interest for the long-term benefit. The fourth correction which is needed is we have entered into a wrong relationship with nature. We've forgotten that we are a part of nature. We are even one with nature in our essence. We are beginning to behave as if we own nature, we possess nature, and nature is meant to be looted and raped and plundered. And there's a point up to which she allows it, and there's a point where she says, you know what, that's enough, I've had enough of it. And either we change or she changes us. Or if we refuse even that, she can just shake herself and knock us out as she knocked out the dinosaurs. It's not difficult for her. You've seen how easily these cataclysmic events can take place. It's not difficult for her. It's just a mother's compassion that she allows us to loot and rape her so long and gives us little pokes here and there just to remind us, you know what, this is not sustainable, we need to do something. But in the process, because we are one with nature, every poison that we throw out there returns to us. Not only in our bodies physically, but psychologically in our minds. Every time we cut all those trees and kill those animals, it comes back to us as depression, as suicidal tendencies, and as deep unhappiness, insecurities, and all kinds of other psychological problems. And think about it. The countries most responsible for this kind of destruction are the ones most suffering the psychological pain, even if they are in physical comfort from wealth. What goes out comes back to us, psychologically also. We need to recover our oneness with nature, know that we are part of a whole, and we need to feel ourselves one with it all. And it's not just that we have to plant more trees and be kind to animals. The mindset needs to change. And I give this example. In school we're taught, because of the environmental crisis, we're taught you must plant more trees because it's good for you. Trees give you oxygen. And this is the biggest error you can do to teach a child that. Because what you're teaching the child is, you have to plant trees because it's good for you. If the trees were not giving you oxygen, then it wouldn't matter. And the way we were taught in childhood, in our own indigenous tradition in India was, you know what, those trees out there, they're living beings like you and I. They are your brothers and sisters, and you should care for them as you would your own family. And if at all a tree has to be cut, the first thing we had to do was to go to the tree and ask for pardon, and ask for permission, and ask for help for what I need, and say, well, please help me, I need to cut you for this reason. Please pardon me the pain I'm going to cause you. And then make sure you plant another tree. But that's the relationship you had as a family in a deeper connection of oneness. The fifth correction is the sense of who we are. We've been taught, and a large part of this goes to a kind of a very reductionist, materialist science, that we've been taught that we're a biological construction, which happens to have developed by a certain pattern of electrical waves in our brain, the illusion of identity. Actually, we don't exist. We're just a pattern of electricity in the brain. But that's not the truth. The deeper truth is that, first of all, we are spiritual beings, emerging from the spirit the oneness essential consciousness. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And in that experience, having identified ourselves with that human constructed body, we've forgotten who we truly are. And we need to recover our deeper identity. And if we set right this perspective, everything changes. All our values change. Why we do what we do changes completely. Our motivations are different because we are different. And the sixth correction is why we are here. And again, the reductionist science has taught us that we are here by chance. Some molecules fell into place, and so a cell formed which fell into place, and somehow we ended up where we are. We're not here by chance. As spiritual beings, we took birth for a purpose, to experience certain things in life and grow in consciousness. And whether you accept reincarnation or not, the point still is there is a growth in consciousness during the life or across lifetimes. And if we recognize that this is the deepest purpose of our being here in this body and life, then we can prioritize all that we do for growth of consciousness first. And we recognize not only our growth, but the growth of others. And we will never do something to enter in conflict with someone else's growth. And therefore, these 6 corrections really are all involving a shift in consciousness of what we are and why we are here. The essential crisis today is a consciousness crisis where we have to move from a narrow, self-centered, intellectually reductionist, intellectually based consciousness to a higher than intellect consciousness. Writing about 100 years ago, Sri Aurobindo pointed out that this is an evolutionary crisis, where all the systems built up by the intellect so far are failing us because nature wants to push us beyond the intellect to something higher. And that something higher is as radically new to humanity as the intellect is new to the animal kingdom. We're actually moving to a new level in human consciousness, and that's why this crisis. And this new level of consciousness is a spiritual consciousness, essentially one of oneness and a transcendence of intellect and narrow logic into spontaneous true knowledge, which we experience in brief glimpses of intuition. But that's just the beginning. There is something in which we have to begin to live permanently. And even he suggested it could lead to a new species of humanity, a supra-mental being,